What's up, everybody? Ooh, check out this piece of tinsel. I could trim it later. Welcome back to the worldwide headquarters of the Pinhook Fishing Club. We're going to do some jig tying and storytelling. Somebody asked me one time, where do I get that intro from? The welcome back. I saw that from a guy that gets super animated. I can't even tell you how many years ago it was when he'd welcome back the kids to school. Anyway, how many years ago was that? Whew, I don't even know. But anyway, welcome back to the headquarters of the Pinhook Fishing Club. Tying some jigs, telling some stories. The stories come from years ago, teaching over the years. This one's going to be solid red, no dual. I try to do that for contrast because the fish will pick up contrast pretty quick. Anyway, so the stories come from way back in my younger years of teaching. Some of them are happy, some of them are sad, some of them are chaotic. This one today is kind of a, it's sad, but it's, I can't even really, it was sad, but it had a good ending to it, I guess you could say. So, I was teaching class, and actually we were going to take a test, so I was going like a quick review, and we were going to take this test. I was telling them they needed to, they were going to write their answers on an answer sheet. Typical test stuff. So we're in there, and right in front of my desk, the first seat, a young lady was sitting there. And so, I've said this before, I had my room split. Big aisle down the middle, rows 3, 3, 3, 3. So my desk was kind of over by the door, and I had one seat here, third one, and that big aisle. And like way up here is like where the front of the room, where the whiteboard was. Anyway, I'm going to put some more flash in here. Where is it? I'm going to put some green. So, I'm sitting at my, once I get started on the test, I'm sitting at my desk. And one of the oddest things I've ever had happen. And to this day, I mean, it is, I need this. Get a pair of these guys. They'll cut through anything. Like now, I'm using it to cut tinsel. So, I'm sitting there, and the kids are taking the test, and I'm at my desk, and I'm doing, I don't know what I was doing, take and roll or something. Anyway, the young lady right in front of me, she leans down to get a water bottle, and when she leans down, all her hair fell off on the floor. And what I mean is, she had a wig on, and the whole thing fell off. And although the kids were taking the test, some didn't see it, but the ones like right in that area, because she sat back up and she's like, oh no. And nobody knew what to say. I just sat there. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She was completely bald. I mean, bald. And on the floor was her wig. And she just calmly said, I know it's a shot, guys. It's okay. I have a health disorder where I just don't have any hair on my head. And I wear wigs. And one girl said, oh, that's how come I noticed you have different hairstyles. And I wonder how quick you can get them changed. The rest of the class, we were just staring because she had no hair. Anyway, she holds the wig and she says, there's these little suction cups, I guess. Different ones have different styles, but she puts this some kind of ointment on there, and then she can fasten it on her head. So she showed the kids how she did that, and she said, while she was doing that, she said, I understand it's a shock. I'm used to it, but it's just a condition I have to live with. And so this is how I deal with it. Well, the kids, not a single kid laughed. Remember, these are 7th graders, different types of kids, different walks of life. No one laughed. Everyone was polite. And they understood what her deal was. And so a couple of the kids said, thanks for explaining and sharing it. What your situation is. It's not easy. And you figured the boys would be kind of, chuckling and being rude. Nobody was rude. Everybody was real polite about it. And I just, by that point I'd stood up and walked to the front of the room in case, somebody was going to be disrespectful. And I told her, I said, Brandy, thank you for, of course, her name's really not Brandy. Any of these stories, guys, I got to throw in some fake names there. I'm sure they wouldn't care so many years down the road, but anyway. So Brandy, she didn't care, there we go. I mean, she handled it well. She just, even if the kids were even if the kids were rude, she had a game plan for how she was going to handle that. And to her credit, she'd been dealing with this for her whole life, and she had like thick skin to deal with this, I'm sure. So anyway, I sat up there, I said, hey, thank you for kind of explaining that, and I thank the kids for being polite about it. And I just said, you never know what people are going through. It's an example, why we need to be polite to each other. This can't be easy to deal with. And, thank you for being kind. Well, for sure, the rest of the whole building was going to know what happened as soon as we left that class. And she was fine with that. Very confident young lady, a great kid, wonderful student. And she was just put through one of the hardest things you could ever go through. Imagine sitting in the class and something like that happened, and you were that person. People are so freaked out about what other people think, what they say, talking in front of a class full of people, being in front of people. I mean, it's one thing about being a teacher is you can spot when somebody gets edgy about being in front of people or around people. I even see it in the grocery store. When the grocery store is full and somebody needs to cut through an area like where the milk is to make their way through people to get to where they want to get. I mean, people are just like, you can just tell. People can get edgy, uncomfortable. And in this situation, she was comfortable with it. I mean, she didn't want it to happen, but she handled it just fine. She explained to the kids. She was upfront about it, transparent. And she said, well, tomorrow I'll bring in, several of the wigs that I use, and I'll show you guys. And so she did the next day, and the kids were cool with it. The girls thought it was cool that she had different styles. And, me teaching and being in there, I'm oblivious to these hairstyles or what's going on. But it never even crossed my mind that she'd come in there with different hairstyles. But anyway, she handled it fine. Everything went well. She was cool with it. And I was so proud of the kids that they could handle that. And for me, you always have to be ready to kind of squash something that's going to come up that's rude, or answer questions, or to help somebody in whatever the situation is. So I just had to kind of roll with it, and she took care of everything. I mean, she knew how to handle it. And at the time, I told my girlfriend what happened, and she was like, I would have died. I couldn't have handled that. I would have been so embarrassed. And she was going on and on. And I said, well, probably she's been going through this since she was, started school little. And she knew how to deal with it. She knew what to say, and she's like, yeah, but I'm sure she was teased at recess when she was little. And I said, well, not by a bunch of kids, maybe a few that were, mean. But I'm sure that in the younger grades, the teacher kind of explained to the kids, hey, sometimes there's medical issues and things that we can't control. And I found this out later, maybe nobody ever knew. So I asked her that. A week later, I checked with her, said, hey, are you okay with things? And she said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, let me ask you something. Did you ever make it through a school year where nobody ever knew? And she said, oh, yeah. But I was always ready in case something like this happened. And see, the thing with being in Amarillo, it's one of the driest places on earth. And especially in the wintertime, man, it gets dry and the wind blows there 15 to 20 miles an hour pretty much every day. It's flat. The wind comes whipping up off the Rocky Mountains way out to the west, comes down off the mountains, and it just blows. It's always blowing from the west or the southwest. Anyway, so when it gets really dry like that, things can happen where, like in this situation, it just didn't work out so well that day with having that on her head. But, she, to her credit, handled it just fine. And then I had, of course, teachers heard about it. And they came down and they asked me, and they're like, well, what did you do? And I said, well, she took care of it. We kept, part of it was a good thing we were taking a test because that didn't last very long. And then they were back, working on the test. And I said, she took care of it. She'll be fine. And then one of the administrators came down to ask me about it. Man, check this one out. Some tinsel in there. Hey. Oops. He didn't get in there. But anyway, I got some tinsel buried in there. And at the back end, this is going to work great. Pike, bass, smallmouth, just crush it. Anyway, so that was, man, that was one day where I went home thinking, geez, thank goodness she knew how to handle that, because I had never seen anything like that in my life. To have somebody's full, it happened right in front of me, and I was like, whoa. The whole thing just fell off. And you're looking at someone from the back that's completely bald. And it was weird. And one thing I noticed, she also talked about that her eyebrows, and I guess women do this, I'm no expert on it, they will draw on some people get them tattooed, their eyebrows. Well, she did that, but she had these little things that would stick on there. I guess it's a thing. So, anyway, that was one of the craziest stories I ever had to, things I ever had to go through. And when I tell that story to people, they're just mind blown that the kids were so cool about it. Yeah, the rest of the day, the year, not one time did I ever hear anybody being rude to her. So that's the thing, guys. Don't lose a lot of hope. I know everyone says, man, the kids these days are just strange and weird. And, yeah, they are. They do strange things. But a lot of times they know when they can bring it together and do the right thing. And in a building with 900 and something kids, 2 grades, nobody was rude to her. And I'm sure when she went on to high school, if she made it through where nobody knew or whatever, she was going to handle it just fine. All right. So that's the story for this edition of jig tying and storytelling. And the stories may not always have to deal with school, but a lot of them will. And like I was saying before, a lot of these stories is so I can remember them one day when I'm retired and I go back and go through the channel. I love going back, watching my old videos and see what's going on. Plus, I go back and watch them to see how I fished a body of water. A lot of guys will keep notebooks, write it down. I just go back and watch so I'm prepped for it. Like I've been getting ready for the winter time, watching a lot of videos. I do a lot of lipless crankbaits. I'll do, believe it or not, I like to do Ned rigs with full size yum dingers. And that's one of the sneaky things I never put on the channel, but I'll clip them a little bit, but I'll put them on there and I do really well. You just let it sit there, move it kind of slow. So anyway, that part didn't make it into the videos with the yum dingers, but I'll go back and watch videos on how I did my other Ned rigs. For me, the Ned rigs do well. I've had a lot of success with them in the winter. I'll also do videos, go back and watch videos how I did jigs, different jig trailers and things like that. I need to put together a video with some of the jig trailers I like to use because I've got some good ones. And the type of jigs. And the same thing with like the jackhammers. Now I'm getting a little bit into the slobber knockers, but I'll always be a jackhammer dude. We'll talk about those different trailers I like for that. But anyway, I love to go back and watch the videos to see how I did with, certain situations, temperatures, and things like that. And when I get old, I'll go back and watch them just to see how I did, over the years. And did I lose any weight? Was I chubbier? Did I look like I aged? That kind of stuff. But with these stories, I'll be able to go back and listen to them and kind of remember. It'll bring me back to those crazy situations. I mean, what would you have done if you would have been a kid in the class? Would you have done what the other kids did and were cool or chilled out about it? What if it had been you that you had that medical situation, or a different kind of medical situation that unfolded? I got a couple of stories about that I will tell you. Guys, I'm not even kidding. I've had people barf in my room multiple times, and there's just no good way to deal with it. And I don't want to say I've perfected it, but I've gotten through it without me barfing. And I just had to step up and just deal with it. And I mean, stuff where barf got on my chair, my desk. We were trapped in a classroom because it was all over a door. Those stories I'll weave in over the next few jig tying and storytelling sessions. But anyway, I hope you like this little series. Like I said, some will be funny, some will be serious, some will just be whatever. But anyway, thanks for hanging out with me. Hey, until next time, I'll see you then. Keep your eyes peeled for some good fishing content coming out. I'm trying to test different things. I'm not by no means a professional jig tyer, a professional angler. I don't do things conventional. I just rig it how it's going to work for me, and I fish it. I'm pretty much 99.9% on the bank. I try to keep it traditional, as like how I grew up fishing. Of course, I could buy a boat. Of course, I could buy a kayak, but I just love doing it from the bank, getting out there and just, fishing. The mystery of fishing. That feeling you get when you hook into one and you're like, man, I got him. So all that's important to me. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with me. Until next time, I'll see you then. Stay warm. Bye-bye. Now get out there and get your lures wet.